Hey, everybody, welcome to Jen Lowry Writes. Right now, we're at the Writing Warriors for Jesus conference, and I'm so excited to be able to present to you my dear friend, host of the Writing Warriors for Jesus conference, writer Derosier. This is Michelle Derosier, and she writes culturally diverse stories from picture books to novels. She launched the In DisQovery brand as a platform to tell stories that snatch back the Haitian narrative from the mainstream. Published under In DisQovery Press is the Grande Pearl series, named for a fictional, majestic pre-war building in New York City. This contemporary Christian romance series will make you fall in love with the true heart of New York City, its people. You'll find clean and wholesome romance that are heartwarming, sweet, uplifting, and will make you laugh, yes, and cry. Yes, I can attest to both of these emotions. Heroes and heroines who aren't always strong in their faith and who learn to draw closer to Jesus as they fall in love. Michelle is also a sensitivity reader who supports creatives and storytellers in ensuring Black and Haitian characters are portrayed thoughtfully and authentically. While she does this work, she likes to remind her clients that hers is not the final stamp of approval on Blackness and Haitianness. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Jen. Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I've been having such a great time at the conference so far. I hope you all have been having a great time as well. And today's presentation is really just a conversation around the idea of creating culturally diverse characters. So as Jen said, my name is Michelle Derosier, writer Derosier, out on these internet streets. And I write culturally diverse stories from picture books to novels. And these are a sample of my work. And I write stories, like Jen said, that really talks to the heart of different cultures, but also in terms of my contemporary Christian series, really looking at faith in a way that is human, in a way that we know that we struggle through faith, but we work to draw closer to the Lord in every step. So today's conversation is really just centered around reminding ourselves who we are as God's people. So I love this verse in Revelation 7:9-10 that says, I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. So when I think about representation of different cultures, different languages, different tribes, different peoples, in the work that we do as writers, I think about heaven, right? This is what heaven looks like. This is what God celebrates. This is, the Bible talks about God not being a respecter of persons. So what matters to God is our heart for him. And our heart for him can come in different packages. It can look like me. It can look like you. It can look like somebody else. But at the end of the day, it's our heart for the Lord. And this, for me, when I think about writing culturally diverse stories, I think about how do I write characters that are representation of the heaven that we will be in. So if you know me, you know that everything that I do have guiding principles. And these are three of the guiding principles for me when I think about writing culturally diverse stories. So the first one, and it's a guiding principle that works throughout my life, that's not just for here, it's human first. And then for this particular culturally diverse topic, we're thinking about the three whys. So why me? Why now? Why this character? And then the last guiding principle is person, family, environment. So human first goes back to another verse that is meaningful for me. So it's love the Lord. Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. So when I think about the guiding principle of human first, I think about it from the perspective of God has called us to love each other. And we as believers are going to be known by the love that we show to others. So in anything that I am doing, I actively keep in mind, am I doing as God is calling me to do? And that's loving him first, and then an extension of that love to my neighbor, to love them as myself. So I know that there are the topic of representation can sometimes get very controversial because people are feeling like they're being attacked. But if you look at it from the perspective of the fact that we are known as believers by the love that we show, it's not about being attacking anybody. It's not about being controversial. It's not about being just aggressive. It's more about, am I loving my neighbor as myself? And for me, as one of the ways that I think you can do that is to make sure that you're considering your neighbor and that you're making sure that they are being represented in a way that is true, that is authentic, that's not in a way that's offensive. So, sorry, let's look at the 3 whys. So the 3 whys are questions that I have found to be really helpful starting points for examining myself about why I want to write a particular character or characters when it comes to cultural diversity. So I know I've heard from other writers before just saying I should be able to write any character that I want. Don't stifle my creativity. And I absolutely agree that we shouldn't stifle another writer's creativity. I do take a pause, though, at being able to write any character that you want. So it's not that I agree or disagree that you can or can't. It's that I'm encouraging you to be really thoughtful about that decision. So when you think about the 3 whys, a lot of it goes back to that initial principle of human first. You can write what you want and who you want, but should you? And if you're not willing to sit down and at least consider and think about why that matters, maybe you're not ready to write characters in a way that honors their humanity. So if you are ready to think about the 3 whys, when you're thinking about the 3 whys, consider what I like to call the truth proximity. And what I call the truth proximity is, what do you think you know as truthful about that particular culture? So if you sit with yourself and just think, I'm writing about this specific culture, what do I know? And then where did that information come from? So you want to consider the source, right? Is this a source to be trusted? And beyond that, are you depending on a single source, or do you have information coming from multiple people or multiple research? So how close are you to that culture that you want to write about? And if you're not close, what information have you been taking in that you either know that you've been taking in or might not realize that you've been taking in, but has been all around you? So really the recommendation is to sit down and think about those questions and be honest with yourself. There is no condemnation here. It's not a matter of, that you're a bad person or a good person. It's a matter of being thoughtful about, okay, am I receiving information that may be harmful or hurtful to somebody else when I think about the character that I'm writing? So that truth proximity to me is what influences how I will write the characters. So the truth that you think that you know, or the truth that you've investigated that you know about this particular culture, will impact how that character is going to think, how that character is going to act, how they're going to move. It's going to influence their behavior. It's going to influence the language that you use. So I'm blanking on who was talking about voice from Monster Ivy, the presentation yesterday. She was talking about character voice. So if you don't understand the truth of that character's cultural background, the voice will not be authentic, right? So a lot of this self-work is about potentially unlearning the truths that you think that you knew and actually making the space to be able to learn new truths, to be able to create a more genuine and authentic character. So I like to look at the second principle, which is the person, family, environment. And then you see that flip where it says environment, family, person. So we do not exist in a vacuum. So our cultural background cannot be specific to just where we come from. It's specific to the environment that we grew up in, the families that we grew up in. And I'm going to do a little exercise taking myself as an example. And it's one that after I do this, Jenna's going to jump on with me and we're going to do together. So this is a useful tool that you can take and do as well. I usually do it with pen and paper. And then I start drawing out. So if I first consider who is the character that I'm trying to write. So you'll see in the center of this oval, circular, some circular thing, at the center is the character that I'm trying to write. So taking myself as the example, I'm writing my real character. So I'm somebody who loves Jesus. I'm compassionate. I'm goofy, awkward, fun. I love to hike. I'm a runner, very slow runner. I love to eat everything in sight. And I don't come to anything unless I'm personally invited. So if I'm told that there's going to be a gathering and you say it to somebody else, but don't send that invitation to me, I'm not coming. So I think about the characters and all their quirks and all their traits, and then I work outwards. So I start center as human first. So looking at the human, this is Michelle. This is the character that I'm trying to write. And I know that Michelle, her cultural background is Haitian. So I was born in Haiti. So that's the largest of my cultural identity. And I was raised in the US. Specifically, I was raised in New York. And even beyond that, I was raised in New York City, in Brooklyn, in a neighborhood called Flatbush. And when I think about the impact of that cultural background, so as a Haitian who was born in the US, or as a Haitian who was born in Haiti and spent her formidable years in the US, specifically in Brooklyn, I think about what other cultures have impacted my growing up and my ability and my access and the way that I moved in this world. So my neighborhood, Flatbush, is a very West Indian neighborhood. So we have representations from almost every single Caribbean country that you can think of, but the main ones are Haiti, Jamaica, and Guyana. And we have Americans, we have Hispanics, specifically Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. So when people, for example, think about my accent, if you were writing me as a character and you just saw that I was a character and I had a Haitian cultural background, you would assume that this is a Haitian accent. But my accent is an amalgamation of all of the different accents that I grew up around. So there are certain words that I say. When I say them, I immediately hear them as the way that Jamaican friends that I grew up say them. There are certain words that I say, and I say them. If I say coffee, the way that I say coffee is very Brooklyn. If I think about the way that I say other words, I can pick up on the Puerto Rican influence. So when you think about your characters and you limit the character to the truth proximity of just their cultural background, what you think you know about it, without diving layers deeper, then you lose out on creating a richer character because you're just really limiting yourself on stereotypes. And looking even layers deeper than that, considering your character's family background. So my family, we were working poor growing up, but we were an extremely close-knit family. We still are. So I grew up, it was my parents, I have a ton of brothers and sisters, and then right next door to us were our grandparents, and then right next door to that was an aunt and some cousins. So we grew up just really close, Sunday dinners, birthdays, sleeping over. So all of that impacts me as a character because family is important to me. Family is central. And I think that is a character, that is a cultural trait for Haitians. But also, if you write a character and just say, okay, all Haitians love family and family matters to them, without considering that you're writing a character who has really bad or contentious relationship with their mothers. So how does the influence of growing up in a culture where family matters, but then you have a contentious relationship with your mother, how does that impact the way that your character acts towards their mother? So do they show reverence, but still are a little bitter? How do they navigate, family meals? How do they do all of those things? So considering the immediate character, and then also considering their family, and then what the larger cultural implication of that family means to them. So we also grew up, I am a believer, and most of my family unit are believers. So my grandmother is the one who led me to Christ. So that has a significant influence in the way that I move as a person, where it's not only looking at me from the cultural background of being Haitian, but it's also looking at what does it mean to be a believer? What does it mean to be a believer in the way that my family taught me, and the way that the church that I grew up in taught me? So when I do this exercise, I take several days, sometimes weeks, just to jot down all of those different pieces when I start to consider who the character is that I'm trying to write. So when you're doing this exercise, and Jen, I'm going to ask you to jump back in just a second. We're going to go in and we're going to maybe do it together. So in the chat, I'd love for you to just think of a character that you're trying to write that is of a different cultural background from yours. And let's take, for example, okay, what is the cultural background? So that's going to be the circle that's out. So for me, that cultural background is Haitian. Were they born in that same country, or were they raised in that same country, or were they raised somewhere else? Were they raised in a city environment? Were they raised in a suburban environment? Were they raised in a rural environment? Their neighborhood, was it a homogeneous neighborhood? Was it culturally diverse in their neighborhood? Who did they have as their closest friends? Was the person that was their friend, was that somebody who was of the same background? When I was initially in elementary school, my best friends were Haitian and Spanish or Puerto Rican. So that made a difference in the things that I was interested in and the things that I liked, versus when I went to high school and the majority of my friends were Native Americans, Americans born here. I mean, not Native Americans. And that made a significant difference in the way that I started to see the world and understand the world. Like, I got their perspective. So that added to me as a person. So when you're thinking about your characters, start thinking about them beyond who they are as a character and start thinking about the connections based on the people, the places, the environment that they grew up in and that they navigate throughout their lives. So Jen, I'm going to ask you to just go ahead and jump in.
I'm here. I'm right here.
Okay, so we're going to create a character together.
Ooh.
So first, let's think about the culture that we want to represent for that particular character.
So do you want a character that I'm writing at the very moment?
Oh, if you have one, absolutely.
So I have one.
Okay, let's do that.
So her name is Patience Averley. Do you want to go to Ireland right now?
Oh, Patience. Okay. So Patience is Iverly, I-V-E-R.
Averlee, Averlee. And Patience is actually spelled Payshance. That is actually my niece's name and how we spell it. So I'm honoring my niece in this.
Okay, awesome.
So Patience Averlee. That's it.
Okay, so before we jump back into Patience, what is supposed to be Patience's cultural background?
She's Irish.
Irish. Awesome. Okay, so tell me a couple of character traits about Patience.
She's musically gifted.
Awesome.
She's adventurous.
Mm-hmm.
She questions everything.
Oh, good. Okay.
She's kind. And do you want her age? Do you want things like that?
What kinds of things does she like to eat? Things she likes to do?
So her flute is her thing.
Oh.
And that is one thing that I have not done is the eating. There is the drinking of tea all throughout the story. So they are tea all the time.
Okay. So when you think about, so Patience is Irish. Was she born in Ireland, raised in Ireland?
Yes. And she actually lives in a place that was named after her family, Averlee, which is her property lines the forest.
Okay, so she is in what sounds like a rural area.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
I'm hitting the chat right now and saying, drop your character names and traits. Add a cultural background. Yeah, let's all do this exercise together. We'd love to see like what's going on with your work, guys.
And when you're looking at Patience's, so she grew up in the neighborhood or in the community that her family founded. It's the property lines the forest. How much of that influenced Patience's adventurous spirit?
Well, even though she is kind of secluded on her land in a way, she has that opportunity to explore. So her father was very instrumental in her exploration. We've got Tish playing along.
Awesome.
Go Tish, Bailey Ray Weatherwater, aka Bay Weatherwater. Oh, and Tish, it would be great if you go ahead and start like outlining out personality traits.
So Jen, when you think about Patience's family, talk to me a little bit about her family unit. Were they close?
Extremely close. She's an only child.
Okay.
And she's very close to her cousins.
How much of that is influenced by the Irish culture and how much of that is influenced by just the fact that her family is close-knit?
Yeah, close-knit. And her parents disappear, so she feels very led to go on this adventure to find her parents. So this is a 13-year-old fantasy story. So just to give you guys the
Okay, and then from there were the founding family of this community.
Yes.
Does that mean that they were more well off, less well off?
They were more well off, yes. Okay. And so they come from a lineage in this story of kings and queens.
Ooh, very nice. And how does that impact her particular personality?
Well, she doesn't quite know enough about her lineage.
Okay.
And that's what she will start to discover as she travels through her journey.
Okay. Great.
So it doesn't impact her as much at first because she's only in time and place.
Okay.
But then when she moves further along into the story, she starts to understand how she becomes a part of something bigger.
Okay. And who is her community? Who are her friends? Who are her support system? Who does she spend the most time in? What time with? What are their kind of their own kind of backgrounds?
So it's Sam and Bella, and they're also Irish. They're there. And I don't have any other friends in the book at all, other than those two, until she joins a different community within the forest. So when she hits the forest community, then that's when the forest kind of comes to life, and she then becomes received into that community and builds friendships that are long lasting. Oh, we've got Bay is an only child. She's close to her cousin, Olivet James, and recently found out that she was adopted after 48 years of life. Oh, Tish.
That's going to impact her significantly.
And Tish said she's African-American, born in Peyton County, Texas. It's a small country town. Okay. And Peyton County was owned by Bay's great-great-grandparents, freed slaves who founded the Peyton County colony.
Okay, awesome. Oh.
And then we've got Luke. Luke's playing along. Go, Luke. Abner Ben Baruch, Jewish 16-year-old. He's passionate about the Lord. He's hot-headed. Tension between him and his father over Abner's girlfriend, and he's longing for a mission.
Oh, okay.
So he's a 16-year-old trying to find his purpose. And where does he belong? And Abner lives in Israel in the 2nd century BC while it is ruled by the Greeks.
Okay. Awesome.
So yes, wow, Luke.
That's great.
Doing this exercise for you, Luke, would be absolutely amazing because you're fitting into the Jewish culture.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so when you think about that truth proximity that I was talking about, how much of that, what do you know about that culture and where does that information come from?
All right. So, Luke, those are great questions to ask. Tish said that she loves that, Luke. I know doing the research, YouTube is such a valuable place for us to go and study. Online resources, huge for us as authors. We are constantly in research mode. I know that.
Absolutely. And when you think about that truth proximity, and first you consider what you know. So Jen, your closest truth proximity is your niece.
Yes.
And then moving outwards, thinking about who else do you know? So maybe there are friends, maybe there are other family members that you can tap into, looking at that truth proximity also generationally. So the perspective of, an Irish person who was born in Ireland versus an Irish American, significantly different. So basing your character who's going to be born and raised in Ireland versus creating a character who was born and raised in America are going to be very different, and they're not going to feel the same thing. They're not gonna speak in the same way. They're not gonna understand the world in the same way that we do. So oh, go ahead, Jen. Sorry.
No, I'm reading along. I'm reading comments and listening to you because everything you're saying they're so true, valid points.
So when you think about that true proximity for you, Jen, for patients, you said YouTube has been some research. What have you been learning?
Folklore, legend, local traditions,
awesome.
Watching interviews online, actually having storytelling events that are online so I can pick up the lilt and the rhythm and the pattern of voice.
Absolutely.
I've absolutely loved doing that because you can find such entertainment online on YouTube where you can get Irish storytellers and, you know, they're sitting in a place around people and they're just sharing, and I'm just taking all of that in. So I did a lot of that when I was first developing the voice for her and making sure that I was representing, you know, her 70-year-old self. And then as she flips back into the role of a 13-year-old, you still have to keep in mind that she's had all of these years of experiences. So her vocabulary may sound a little more mature and older because she is telling it through that lens.
Yes, absolutely.
So I was having to shift between the childhood voice, but also remembering that she's still the elder telling that in that fourth wall. So I used a lot of the fourth wall concept because I just love that, where the narrator is going to stop and say, okay, dear reader, now it's time we must pause here and discuss why this matters. And they give the little background. So I did a lot of that work, playing around with those techniques. And so with the voice, I watched elders speaking.
Yes.
So I actually went in and did more of that work instead of looking at a teenage experience because I wanted it to have that feel of the elder conversation.
And knowing that that's something that you needed more of for your particular story. And
yes,
that research is exactly right. So the idea that as your story is coming together, there's going to be information that you're going to know naturally. I still think even with that information, you need to do research outside of what you think you know. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
No, I was saying I loved what you said, unthink and relearn. I love that. And someone else in the comments earlier said the same thing. Wow, I love that statement. So, yeah, we've got tons of people doing the same thing. We've got Anne. Anne has now jumped in and she's creating all of hers.
Awesome.
There we go. Luke is asking, Luke's asking a really good question because this is what we're talking about. Luke said characters often have different accents and pronouncements. Do you suggest trying to convey this in dialogue with various spellings, or is there another way to do this?
I think you might. So I'm going to speak for me, and then I'm going to speak from what I've heard have been helpful. I don't know if you've read Hillbilly Elegy. I can't ever pronounce
I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
So they're in Appalachia, and some of the words in the pronunciation are written out the way that they would speak it, but it's not done. And it's been a while since I've read the book, so I can't remember exactly, but it's not done throughout the book. And one of the reasons that I've heard from editors when I've done this, where I'm writing a character who is Haitian with a heavily accented Haitian, and trying to write the word in the way that they would speak it, is that you want to be careful to not take the reader out of the story where they're just spending so much time every other sentence figuring out, like, wait, how do I say this? How do I pronounce this? So just really being mindful about the frequency with which you do it.
And so Tish said that she would because it can make the character authentic. And I love how you've added just to do that with intentional placement. So that way you're not distracting the reader and carrying them away from your message, but that you're giving them that hint of balance. Oh, yeah, Tish, there's the word. The create a balance within the work. Very good.
Yep, that was a really good question.
Yep, and Luke said using those words strategically, that's a really good point to make. Anne has been playing along. She said that her protagonist is Becca Martin, who is a white girl born in her fictional hometown of Middle Creek, Mississippi. She has watched her best friend from high school fall off of the stepping stones, and she loves coffee. She has an older sister who is jealous of her. She also has a friend, Shelly Marcus, from the computer company where she works, and her friend was raised very prim and proper.
Oh, that's I wonder what the dynamics is with that friendship. Does she feel like she has to be prim and proper in her presence? Or is it that she's feeling like, despite that, I can still be myself? That's really curious.
And so Luke said earlier that, yes, he will do more research because he has studied the historians from ancient Israel as well as some of the Jewish traditions and the yearly feast. So wonderful. Research is key, guys, while we are also creating that balance to make sure that we are promoting authenticity.
And I think there's nervousness sometimes with not wanting to create a character that will offend or so when I said, going back to that question of, am I the one to write any character that I want? That I was saying that I am not saying that you are or you aren't, but taking the time to be really considerate about the question, like sitting with yourself and just making sure that you have the right intention, and then following up that right intention with very meaningful steps in doing the research and talking to people. There are the work that I do with sensitivity read, there are people who do this, and it is something that you take a very long time to just understand the nuances. Like I was saying with, for example, I did a sensitivity read for a book that came out. It's a YA that traditionally published that came out just this past year, 2 years ago. And it was a Haitian boy who was raised in Florida. So Florida, if you know anything about Miami, it's heavily Cuban and then also Haitian. But the political dynamics, Cubans have a lot more political power and there are some tensions. So when you are, that's why I talk about the importance of environment. When you are creating the kind of characters, how are those dynamics going to impact the way that the characters move with other characters? So I was looking at the Haitian best friend of the main character and the way that he engages with her one-on-one versus the way that he engages with her when he's in her family's home, very different. So all of those things matter because when you as the reader reads it, especially if you're a reader who is of that background, you pick up on it really quickly. Another example, I remember reading a romance novel and the character, one of the friend characters was Black with natural hair. And she was staying over at her, at the main character's home. Her hair, she's white woman, straight, non-curly hair. And there was a part in the book where she ends up using the lady's hair products and then her hair is fine. And I'm like, that is very unrealistic for the texture of a Black person's natural hair to be able to use the same product as her own straight hair friend without some remark of, you know, maybe it's just a throwaway line. Well, okay, I'm just gonna have, this is the best that we can do for now, or let me put on a hat so they don't see me until I get home. It can be something really just like humorous to make mention of the fact that you understand the nuances, but the fact that it really, the book moved with it as if that were really realistic, when knowing the cultural background, when knowing the hair texture, it wasn't. It was pretty glaring. And I'm sure that the author did not notice it at all. And that would have been something that a sensitivity reader would have picked up on right away.
And this is a good segue too to Luke's question, because he said, would you suggest interviewing people from different backgrounds as a way to more accurately create characters?
I think absolutely. And I think you also just want to be sure that you're not asking for emotional labor. You're not asking people to do that work without considering the fact that there are people who do this and it's a paid thing, just like you would pay an editor. I am always happy when people want to make sure that they're portraying a character correctly. So if somebody comes to me and asks me, hey, I am considering writing this Haitian character, and here's the information I know, maybe I can help you, maybe I can't. I'm happy to do that, but I just want to be careful that you're not asking people to do emotional labor without considering that it is heavy.
And so reaching out to beta readers and sensitivity readers, would you recommend that someone do that in their, like right after their first draft, so that way that they're clearing things up before they send it out to editors and paying all of that money to get everything pretty much polished and clean?
Yeah, I'll tell you the process that I use with my clients. Usually they've gone through that first draft. And it's not that, the internal first draft where you write the book and you're like, I should probably sit on this for at least another 3 months before I actually write my first draft. So not that first draft, the real first draft. You do want to engage somebody, and I hate the word sensitivity reader because it just makes it, you're engaging. It's not about sensitivity, it's about authenticity. So I would encourage you that after that real first draft to get somebody in there, because your editor, their purpose is not to look for things like that. They're serving a completely different purpose in the way that they're looking at your work. And then after going through and making a revision, most clients are okay if you come back. Most sensitivity readers are okay if you come back and say, hey, I've made a revision. The amount of time that it will take them to look at the second version will be less, so it won't be as much. But for the clients that I work with, we do 2 reviews. So after that initial inline editing, like I go through and, write down through your manuscript, and I go in and I make my notes the same way that an editor would. I provide resources that I'm asking you to go follow up on to be able to do the research to rewrite certain scenes. And then if you do want to do that additional step after you've made the revision, then I will take a look at it. Most people do, some people don't, but those 2, after the real first draft and then after you've made the revisions. And just because somebody shares with you, their feedback doesn't mean you have to take it. But just making sure that you're not dismissing the feedback because you think that it's attacking you, because it's not about attacking you. It's about making sure that you're considering how your words will impact the people who will read it.
Love it. Love it. Guys, we are here. We have like a minute left, Michelle, and I still see some questions on our circle. Oh, they're still there. We have like a minute left. So guys, while you are considering building your characters, interviews, reaching out to authenticity readers. I love it. Michelle, go ahead and coin the new phrase and throw out sensitivity reader and say, look, we're authenticity readers. So I know that you wanted to close out, Michelle. So I'm going to drop down to let you finish up this part of your presentation.
Okay, no problem. Great. And just as there are no two snowflakes who are alike, really making sure that as you're writing a character, that you're, and I think intentional and intentionality is the word here for today, that you're just really being mindful of the fact that you're writing a character and there is a person who will read this, who will see it and who will either see themselves in it in a way that encourages them and makes them feel as if you were thinking about them, or you can do it in a way that will make that person feel dismissed and not appreciated and not part of and not considered. So if we think about ourselves going back to knowing that we are believers and knowing that the way that heaven is displayed is that it will be tribes, nations, tongues, all of the different variations on people, and that each person that God has created uniquely, really being mindful of the fact that if you think about that, you'll be less likely to fall into stereotypes and really being careful to create characters that are true and genuine and authentic. So I am at writerderosier.com, Writer Derosier, again, all across the internets. So I am M. Michelle Derosier, and I love to stay connected with folks. If you have any questions, if you need any additional resources, please feel free to reach out and chat. And Jen, thank you. So this is my thank you dance.
Awesome. So we had Dee said, wow, so good. Luke said he loved it and thank you. This was excellent and a lot of points that he can use in his writing going forward. And Anne was like, okay, now Beck and I are going to have a long talk because after listening to your presentation, she's ready to now jump in and have some conversations with her character. So you were amazing, Michelle, said Tish. And then Eli said, important information. I can see the need to understand the cultural background. You wouldn't want to read a book about your culture and see it misinterpreted. And thanks for your input. So guys, I want to thank all of you for joining us for the Writing Warriors for Jesus conference. Michelle, you are such a dear, lovely friend. I just love you so much. And thank you for sharing your gifts with us and your ray of sunshine. And guys, stick around because Michelle is getting ready to host Ann Harrison, who's in the chat right now, who is getting ready to talk with us about no excuses. So here's my challenge to you. You've got like 12 minutes to grab water, grab lunch, get a snack, sit right back down with us and join us for Writer Derosier, Michelle's hosting of Ann Harrison. All right, guys. Love y'all. See you in a minute.
All right. See you soon. Bye.